Welcome to World Vision's Windows to the World. I am Melissa Doyle, and tonight we are taking a closer look at the impacts of COVID-19 on some of the world's most vulnerable communities. We're speaking to two leaders who know these stories too well. Gemma Snowdon from the World Food Programme based in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, and the President and CEO of World Vision International, Andrew Morley. We begin tonight speaking to Andrew. Hi, thanks for your time.
Hi Mel, thank you for doing this.
Before I get into the work, tell me a little bit about you. So, like all of us, isolation, you've got some teenage sons, I believe. How's everyone managing? How are you going?
Yeah, I've got two boys at home, and the house feels very small with four of us around. My wife she's a school teacher, so she's still going in from time to time. It's great to have everybody back together. It's great to have the family together. My two boys are back from university. But it feels like a very strange time. It started feeling like a holiday, but now it just feels very strange. I think it feels very strange for many of us, doesn't it?
It is a really strange time, and as you say, we're not everyone's as lucky as we are. Not everyone's in a nice warm house and feeling safe. I guess we haven't seen it to the extreme that particularly Europe and the US. I saw a tweet that you had put up on from one of your colleagues in Brazil, where you said that it's got so dire that children, they have to choose between COVID-19 or starvation. How bad is it?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I was speaking to someone in Syria just a couple of weeks ago, Rami, and he told me about the choices that they face in Syria, where many people are day workers, so they need to earn to eat. And they are faced with the choice: do they go out to work, often in the markets or in the fields where social distancing is impossible, or do they stay at home and risk the real chance of malnourishment or even starvation? And it's a kind of stark choices that no father wants to have to make. I met a girl called Esther in Kenya last year, and she was in a school. She came running up to me when I attended this school. It's a school that we've been supporting for some time. It's where we have sponsored children. And she came up to me and she said, "Can I tell you my story?" I said, "Yes, of course you can." And this is a story I shared at the UN General Assembly in November last year. But Esther came up to me and she said that she was asked by her parents if she would marry an older man. And she said no. And then she was forced to marry the older man. She actually underwent female genital mutilation first, which is a rite of passage. She married this man and then ran away because he abused her and she was so young. And then her parents took her back because he'd given them 6 cows in return for her hand in marriage. And after she went back, he abused her again, and then he kicked her out because she couldn't cook. She was on the streets, her parents wouldn't take her back. And in the end, she came to a World Vision facility and we helped her, we gave her education, we gave her healthcare. And she was in tears when she was telling me this story, which is all heartbreaking. But let me tell you, Esther was 8 years old. And so it's just, and when you've seen it, man, when you've seen it face to face, it just makes you passionate about wanting to make a difference. And we were there for Esther, and I just hope and pray that we can be there for children who are going to be impacted by this. But I really hope that we can do all we can to mean that the girls can get back to school, which means that they won't be vulnerable in the way that Esther was.
Oh, you've got 8. I have a 16-year-old daughter. That's young to me. 8, just while the focus is on the areas that need it, you worry that when it does go, people go back to their own lives and their own issues, that so many people will be forgotten. Can you give us, look, it is a horrific situation worldwide. The numbers that we are seeing are frightening, but there's got to be a hope. There's got to be a message of hope. What would you say? What would your message of hope be?
My message of hope is that if you're on the ground in the places that are most at risk from this, if you're there, if you're in the communities, if you're trusted, if you build relationships with the local faith partners and local community partners, as we have, you can actually make a massive difference to communities. we saw this with Ebola when we responded to Ebola first in West Africa and then in DRC. We were trusted, and many of the messages around Ebola were just misinformation. There were rumours, they were scare stories, but because we were able to talk through and with the community leaders, we could bring information, real information that made a difference. And that sounds like a small thing, but can change communities and can change the way in which people act and respond to this, and can change people's lives. And there's also an element here where we believe that we're here for a time such as this, that we were called to respond and to be ready for a time such as this. So as difficult as it is on the ground, and our lives might seem difficult, but in comparison to people who are working in some of the toughest places across the world, with some of the most vulnerable communities, they've got it really tough. But we believe that we were called, and we're here for a reason. And we're so pleased that we're able to be there to respond, and that we made the move a few years ago to go to the toughest places, to go to the places where often there are no other partners. And it's made a difference to millions of people's lives. We've already impacted 11 million children just in a few small weeks. And we're aiming to go to closer to 100 million children that we support and protect through this.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your time. I wish I could have you thank every single person on the ground that is working on behalf of World Vision to help these kids. I wish it was that simple, but please pass on all of our thanks. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, Mel, I'd also love to thank those who support us, because when you're doing your child sponsorship, it might feel like a small thing, but when you've seen people like Esther in the field whose lives have been changed, this is not a small thing. This is transformational. It changes people's lives and it changes the world. So particular thanks to all those who support us, because without you, none of this would be possible.
Beautifully said. Andrew Morley, thank you.
Thank you, Mel.
And now joining me from Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, she is with the United Nations World Food Programme, Gemma Snowdon. Well, hi, Gemma. Thank you for your time. Take us back to the beginning and what made you leave the safety of Australia and the lovely shores of home to head to one of the toughest hotspots in the world?
Sure. Well, I spent around 10 years working as a journalist, and during that time, I would often cover international news stories. And for me, it was really difficult covering these stories and seeing what was going on from afar, but not actually being able to do anything physically to help. So in 2016, I decided to make the switch to humanitarian work. So I did my master's, and I spent a couple of years learning the practical ins and outs of humanitarian work and humanitarian aid. So after a couple of years working with Red Cross and learning a lot more about how the humanitarian world worked, a job came up with the World Food Programme working in Cox's Bazar. And Cox's Bazar was something that was particularly close to my heart, because I'm sure that I wasn't the only one in 2017 watching in horror as hundreds of thousands of Rohingya fled across the border to Bangladesh, sharing stories of absolutely horrendous violence that they'd experienced. And this was something that was happening in our own region. So when a job came up with the World Food Programme and it matched my exact skill set, it was hard to say no to that. So now I've been here about 18 months and it's been so rewarding, and I like to think and hope that I've been helping make a difference in some way.
I have no doubt you have. For those who've never seen it, just paint me a picture of what Cox's Bazar is like, how big it is, how people are living, how many are there.
Okay, so in the refugee camps, people live in tarpaulin and bamboo shelters, and it's the most overcrowded and congested camp in the world. So basically they're living on top of each other. You couldn't even fit like that. It's like an arm's distance between the shelters. It's less than a metre. So in that regard, life in the camps is really difficult, not just because it's crowded and congested, but also because people spend the majority of the year, 9 months of the year, with the threat of natural disasters hanging over them. There's 2 cyclone seasons and 1 monsoon season every year. A direct hit from a cyclone in the camps would be absolutely devastating. It's unlikely to be able to withstand that, and we had a close call just last week. And then on top of that, the monsoon season brings incredibly heavy rains. And last year in one 24-hour rain event, there were 16,000 people displaced. So this is something that the humanitarian community works year-round to address, but realistically, there's only 4 or 5 months of a dry season where we can get a lot of work done. And on top of that, people have no livelihoods opportunities. There's no access to internet in the camps. They often have to walk long distances to get to distribution points for things like their food and their LPG for cooking and other distributions that they need to get to.
Oh, it's a really tough existence. And then we throw into the mix a global pandemic. Have you had access to the camps? What is COVID-19? How has it changed the way you work, and what has it done to the camp?
So only life-saving activities are continuing in the camps at the moment, and one of those life-saving activities is food distributions. However, we have reduced our staff footprint in the camps by 70%, and that's to reduce the risk of COVID-19 in the camps.
Has there been any testing done in the camp, or has there been anybody with it? I mean, I kind of, all I'm thinking of is, oh my God, imagine if there was an outbreak in a camp when everybody is that close. That would even be more difficult to contain than anywhere else around the world.
Yeah, so unfortunately, despite all the precautions that have been taken, there are now confirmed cases in the camps. The humanitarian community has acted very quickly to isolate the cases and try and do contact tracing as well, and ask people to quarantine themselves. So we don't know what will happen next or how much it will take hold, but it has the potential to be absolutely devastating if it does. I mean, we've seen healthcare systems in developed countries like the US and Italy and Spain, even the UK, absolutely buckle under this pandemic. And in the Rohingya camps, there was already limited healthcare. And despite the fact that new isolation and treatment facilities have been built, there's still a lack of ICU beds. There's a lack of ventilators. I don't think they have any ventilators at the moment. So we don't know what's to come, but if it takes hold, I imagine that it will be devastating in the camps.
Given what you do, there's a lot of people who are watching this, from the comfort of homes in Australia or wherever they may be. And I guess all of us always want to know what we can do to help. What would you say?
I'd say the easiest and fastest thing people can do to help is to donate to their favourite humanitarian organisation. I mean, even for WFP, it costs us $24 million a month to be able to assist people just with food. And there are so many other needs that people have in the camps, whether it's water and sanitation, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education. So, I mean, if you really want to help, the best thing that you can do is to donate and research and find your favourite organisation and then donate to them. And the second thing, because not everyone's in a position to donate, particularly now, as many people might find themselves out of work during COVID-19, I think the second thing that you can do is just to remember the Rohingya are here and not forget about them. When I talk to people in the camps, their number one fear is that the world will even forget that they're there, and they know that if the world forgets they're there, then humanitarian organisations will be unable to assist at the levels that they're currently assisting at. So yeah, that would be my number one message. Remember the Rohingya, and if possible, donate.
I'm hoping you can introduce me to somebody. Have you got Foxtrot?
Foxtrot, come here, buddy. I do.
Oh, was he just waiting in the wings for his moment, was he? Okay, so you have to tell everyone the story of Foxtrot and maybe introduce us.
So Foxtrot was a puppy that we found on the beach here in Cox's Bazar. So I'm just tempting him over here. Although he was massive now, when he was a puppy, he was so small he could fit in the palm of our hands. So we found him on the beach, and we spent the whole day trying to find his mum and his siblings, but we couldn't. We tried to put him with some foster mums, which absolutely didn't work. They tried to attack him. So we ended up taking him in and taking him to taking him to the WFP office. And ever since then, he's just become part of our team. And then probably about 4 months after we got him, we thought we'd put him to work because everyone needs to have a job. And so we set up an Instagram account for him so that he could tell the story of the Rohingya and the Rohingya response to a different audience, people who might not necessarily engage in humanitarian news and information.
Before I let you go, I know that you've got a big day ahead and a lot to do. A sense of hope. What would you say to people who are watching? I mean, all of us are going through moments, I'm sure, where we're a little overwhelmed by everything that is, the globe over. What would you say? I think that my number one message would be that humanity prevails. We've faced a lot of challenges in our past, and we're going to face a lot of challenges in our future. But what I've learnt from working in the Rohingya camps and speaking to Rohingya refugees is that no matter what you go through and no matter how horrific the situation seems at the time, people do recover and people are resilient. And so there is hope for the future. And I believe that's true not only for all the countries currently going through the COVID pandemic, but also for the Rohingya refugees. I hope that their future holds a lot more hope for them. Absolutely. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you to everybody who is there working hard to make sure that they are safe and looked after and cared for. And yeah, it's lovely to talk to you, Gemma. Thank you. You too. Well, thank you for joining me for World Vision's Windows to the World. As we know, in our 70-year history, this is the largest emergency response ever. For more information, you can head to our website and see some of the work that is being done in the community. And I really look forward to your company next week as we run another edition of Windows to the World. Bye.